Tonight, we are going to continue our discussion of step 5. And before I focus specifically on this step, I like to put this step in context because we are specifically looking at the steps from the perspective of how they help us achieve emotional sobriety. Now, I think many of you know I've been in the program for over 49 years. And I can tell you that I have never heard anyone share this in a meeting before. In the 12 and 12, when Bill is talking about step 12, and about the fourth or fifth sentence into his first paragraph, he goes, "Here we begin to practice all of the 12 steps of the program in our daily lives so that we and those about us may find emotional sobriety." Now, this was in 1950 that Bill wrote the 12 and 12, published, I think, in 52. And here he is explicitly stating that the goal of working this program is not only physical sobriety, which is very important for those of us that are using drugs or that are involved in process addictions, because we're not going to be clear-headed enough to do the work that we needed to do. So the plug in the jug is important. But the work that we're doing is to help us achieve emotional sobriety. Now, that blew my mind when I read it. Literally, in the whole 49 years I've been in the program, I've never heard anyone say that before. And here Bill is explicitly stating that. So now when we take this perspective, and we've been going back through the steps and talking about, well, if we think about emotional sobriety and we think about what it is, and look, this is with the help of Bill Wilson's insights. If you have not read the letter that Brian read some excerpts from, please get a hold of it. It's a very important piece of literature. In fact, I really believe that emotional sobriety is the fourth legacy that Bill has left us. After the steps, tradition, and the general service office, I believe that emotional sobriety is our fourth legacy. So when we look at the steps from the perspective of helping us achieve emotional sobriety, we can see in step 1 that when we talk about our lives being unmanageable, what we're really talking about is what Bill said in his letter, that we put the cart before the horse. That it was an impossible way of life, expecting life to conform to our expectations and then demanding that it be so. That's what we're doing in step 1, is to really accepting that fact that that's what's been causing us problems. Is that we have been dependent on life being a certain way for us to be okay, which meant that we became outstanding at manipulation and controlling, or trying to control, which really never worked, right? Even Bill wrote about that in the big book. How about we step on the toes of others and they retaliate, right? We are the actor trying to play as the director in our lives, those kinds of things. And he really gets it. He doesn't say we're the director. He says we're the actor, right? That thinks we're the director. So we're trying to command everybody. Step 2 comes along because in step 1, we create this existential crisis that, my God, we are emotionally dependent. We've had the cart before the horse. It's been an impossible way of life, but we've got no idea how to do things differently. So we're in an existential crisis, and that leads us to step 2, right? We need that crisis resolved, and that's what these steps do. They build up a certain kind of an energy that is, just longing for some kind of resolution, is really desiring some resolution. And that comes in step 2. We get hope, right? That we can be restored to sanity. If we think of sanity as just straight thinking, now we can start to see that, my God, my expectation that life is supposed to be the way that I want it to be, and that's the only way I'm going to be happy, is not straight thinking. That's twisted. That's incredibly immature. That's the king baby, queen baby stuff that we've talked about. So now we come to that realization that there is a possibility. So once again, that feeling of hope fills us up and now moves us towards needing to take some kind of an action. And that action is in the form of a commitment to finding a new way of life, to finding a new way to be in life. I think that's even more specific to this. We need to learn how to be in life and surrender, or what Bill says in his letter, unhook these expectations. That's what we're making a commitment to, is really, how can I unhook these expectations, let go of them, and then get on with learning how to develop the capabilities and skills to deal with life on life's terms. So that's what we're making a commitment to seeking this new way of life. Well, then the first tangible evidence of our commitment, because if you're going to make a commitment, it needs to be followed by action. And that's what happens in step 4. We made that searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. When we went back and looked at that inventory from the perspective of emotional sobriety, we looked at the impact that our emotional dependency has had on our lives. And that becomes a very important part of this process, is to pay attention to what have I done to myself? What have I done to others with this emotional dependency that I have? How has that impacted my life? So we make a searching and fearless moral inventory. We get honest with ourselves about what that's about. We start exploring that. And now, after we develop this practice of self-examination, which is so important to achieve emotional sobriety, and that's what we're beginning to do here in step 4, now we're going to take what we've learned and we're going to share it with someone else. And that's what we're doing in step 5, right? We're taking what we've learned and we're talking about the exact nature of our wrongs. And last time I said one way of thinking about the exact nature of our wrongs was really the big lies. And we talked about those last time, and I'm not going to go over those today. But I want to talk about the importance of authenticity in terms of the establishment of emotional sobriety. I want to talk about the enlightened witness, because that's what this step is about finding someone in our life that can be an enlightened witness, someone who's done the work on themselves, who's paid attention to these issues that we're talking about here. Now, we in this room are developing a community of people committed to emotional sobriety. And as this goes on, I'll be asking people to be open to sponsoring other people and working with one another in this community, so we can continue to grow ourselves and grow each other in the achievement of emotional sobriety. Now, for me, when I turned to my sponsor, Thom, who I did my 5th step with now many, many times when I've gone back over, let me let you know what went into the selection, to me selecting Thom to be my enlightened witness for this step. First of all, by being with Thom and hanging out with him, I was able to see that the program was integrated into his life. And this was very important to me. He walked like he talked. Herb talks about this one Catholic saint. I can't remember the saint's name, but the saint said something like, in all your affairs, in all your life, everywhere you go, preach the gospel. And then the saint said, and sometimes use words. And sometimes use words. See, that's what I saw in Thom. It wasn't what he was saying. It was how he was living. It was who he was. It wasn't just how great he sounded in the meetings, but it was what I saw him do in his relationships with other people. That's what attracted me to Thom, is he was integrated, that he was striving to take the things that he was talking about and learning and applying it to his life and then sharing it with others. And for me, one of the most important things that I saw in his behavior was the fact that he was able to pull his covers about his need, or his, what he thought he needed to do was to be perfect. And he was able to struggle with his imperfections honestly and openly. And it was his humility that I was so attracted to. He could accept his limitations. He could acknowledge the gaps in his knowledge. He could acknowledge the mistakes he made in relationships, in his life. He had an overall, balanced sense of who he was and who he wasn't. And he was able to face that and share that in an authentic way with me. That turned me on. I say all the time that sometimes pain gets us here, but if you don't get excited about the possibilities here, you're not going to stay. Because once the pain subsides, what happens? Our motivation now subsides. But if you get excited about growing yourself along these lines, if you get excited about the possibilities, they're endless, these possibilities. I keep showing up because I keep learning new things. Every day there seems to be another revelation. Every day there seems to be another little gem that I discover along this road that I can plug into my life, or another opportunity to plug this. And trust me, now at this age range, and a 2-year-old and a 7-year-old, I get to practice these principles a lot. Marriage also requires that, by the way. I don't think they should issue marriage licenses. I think they should say, go get some emotional sobriety and then get married. You have a better chance to stay married if you have some of these tools, that kind of a thing. So that's what I saw in Thom. It was not just the knowledge he had, but how he was living his knowledge. And he's been my sponsor for 49 years. And I got to tell you, I still see him living it that way. Just to give you an example, his wife, he's been married to Tally for a long time, has really been struggling with stage 4 lung cancer. And it's been a hell of a battle for her. And about a week ago, he had just made her a meal. And he lives in Kauai, a beautiful home, right near where Gilligan's Isle was filmed, right in that cove, literally 100 yards from where they filmed Gilligan's Isle. And Tally, his wife, and she's really been struggling. It's been a long time. She's now lived probably a year longer than they anticipated. And she was sitting there, and her appetite's been terrible. She's lost 40 pounds, and she wasn't that big of a woman to begin with. And she looked at Thom and she says, "This is the best meal I've had in a long time." And then looked out the window at the cove, and Thom felt her leave at that moment. She started to make some sounds inside of her, and he was wondering if she was choking, and called the neighbor that downstairs. It was a nurse, and they checked. There was nothing going on. And paramedics came. They tried to resuscitate her for a long time, and she had passed away. And this is who Thom is. He laid on the floor with her for the next couple hours before the coroner came. And he held her. And he said to her, "Now you're free. Now you can go back to where you came from when this whole journey started." And he told her how much he loved her, how much that the relationship meant to him. Just so happened, after the coroners came, he got on a Zoom call, because Tally had started. She was the chairman of the board of Narcotics Anonymous. She started this international women's meeting with women from all over the world. Hundreds of women came to this meeting, and Thom got on and told them all that she had passed away. And they said, "Thom, we just want you to know that one of the things Tally has been telling us is how at times she questioned how much you really loved her. But your care for her during her illness and what's been going on the last 2 years has made her feel more love than she's ever felt in her whole life. That's who Thom is. When I met him, he said the program is about love in action, loving action. That's what he said. That's the solution to everything, Al. It's loving action, or love in action is another phrase he used an awful lot. So that's who I picked to sponsor me in the program and to do my fifth step with. And when I shared things with him and talked with him about things at the end of it, he was able to, in such a loving and safe way, he created what I called a safe emergency. He would say, Al, did this ever happen to you? Because this happened to me. And he would now talk about something I was ashamed of talking about. And that was part of what I needed to talk about, but I didn't have the courage to talk about it because I was afraid of what he was going to think about me. And then after he shared, I said, God, yes, that happened to me. He says, you didn't share that because you were afraid of I was going to judge you, weren't you? He says, you don't need to be afraid of who you are anymore. That was his message. You don't need to be afraid of who you are anymore. All of you is welcomed here. That's the message. And I never heard that from anyone in my entire life. All of you is welcomed here. There was no expectation. That was the first moment I had in my life of being with someone with no expectations. He was accepting me as I was, warts and all, the good and the bad, the wonderful and the shitty, the great and the creepy. I mean, there was room for all of that with him at that moment. And that meant in this program and in my experience. That's to me what I mean when I talk about an enlightened witness. Someone who's looked at all of these different parts of him or herself and has come to some kind of peace with it, even though they may not be resolved, because some of these things won't. They're just not going to be as big of a deal in our lives as we work with them. But that's what it means to be with an enlightened witness. That's the kind of person that we need in our life. And thanks to that experience, it showed me that kind of a relationship with someone was possible. And not only has Thom been that kind of an enlightened witness in my life, but other people have as well. And the therapist, Dr. Gary, who I worked with early in my recovery, she was an enlightened witness. Other therapists along the way, people I went to workshops with, people in my life today, Michael McGee, Thom Rutledge, Brian Lutz. I mean, people that I can just be myself with completely and openly and honestly. So that becomes such an important part of our experience, is finding that person that can co-create that experience with us. And it is a co-creation. It's not just what Thom did, it's what Thom and I did. It was the chemistry, the magic between us that happened that day and has continued to happen for a long, long time in my life with him. The other thing I would say to you is that as we, which I consider all of us now pioneers in this emotional sobriety, we are going to be able to be that enlightened witness for others, because there aren't a lot of people who sat down and looked at the issues we're looking at as we go through these steps, not from the point of view of our emotional dependency and the demands and unenforceable rules that those have created and the damage that's done in our relationships with others and the big lie that that's created with ourselves. So each and every one of you that are doing this work is you are now, it's like in Jedi training, to become an emotional sobriety Jedi, right? And to go out and to carry this message to other people, and to be an enlightened witness for other people, and to create that space where people can begin to look at these issues in a safe emergency, right? It's a safe emergency because you're pushing your comfort zone, right? You're going beyond what you're typically comfortable with when we're talking about and looking at these things. And that's what we're doing. And that's what this step is all about. So I'll turn this over to my dear friend and colleague, Thom Rutledge, for his comments. And then we'll open this up for discussion.
Wow. It's, when did Tally die? What?
About a week ago now.
Week ago? Because I don't want to say a lot on top of that. That's just so beautiful what you're saying, and it's and I don't know Thom like you do, obviously, but it's like I always have felt, you said safe emergency. I always felt safe every time he's around. I spent some time at dinner with Tally too, and it's like, what a beautiful story. What beautiful last words. This is the best meal I've had in a long time. It's like, so thanks for sharing that, man. I wrote down as you were writing, as you were talking at the very beginning, I wrote down, we seek enlightened witnesses as we become enlightened witnesses. And then, as often is the case with our brains, you landed in the same spot. It's like, and it's not just we're enlightened witnesses to each other, but to ourselves. We discover that part of ourselves, that Jedi part of ourselves, and that wisdom part of ourselves that basically can, that I find is part of the work that I've done. And I think sometimes I think the time I've just spent, just we've talked about aging some, and it's like, I always say that wisdom has two requirements. First of all, staying alive, and the other is paying attention. And, we all know plenty of people who've stayed alive a long time, but clearly have not been paying attention. But everybody in this room who shows up for this thing is paying attention. And we're seekers, and we're doing that together, and I love that. I also wrote down, you don't have to be quoting Thom. You don't have to be afraid of who you are anymore. That needs to be on our walls. That's a beautiful thing. And I just will tell one story. It's about enlightened witnesses, so it's on topic, I guess. I learned a few months ago that mine and Dee Dee's couples therapist had died. She had been retired for some time, and I just happened to find out at the day that they were having their visitation at the funeral home just down the road from where my office was. So I went down to say goodbye to her, and I got a chance to spend. It was an open casket, and I just got a chance to talk to her. Her name was Mary Elizabeth Hickman, and I was talking to her, and everybody was, when you get to be old, when you come to these gatherings with people, it's a reunion of sorts. People get together and they get to see each other again and stuff. So for this moment, I was alone with Mary Elizabeth, and I was thanking her for everything that she had done for me, because she really made me a better person. And I had a lot of therapists, and they all really helped a lot. But Mary Elizabeth was our couples therapist. She was the one that taught me that cleaning cat litter was a thing to do to show love, because my wife told me it was. She told me, simple little things like that. It's like, oh, that can't be love. It's like, she said, she had this wonderful chair. She would roll right up in front of me, and she says, well, it is. And I said, well, how do you know? And she points to Dee Dee, who's sitting across the room from me. And she says, because I just asked her. And it's like, she just taught me these wonderful, simple things, and she could confront me with anything. She never was mean. She wasn't even tough. She was just honest. And I'll just finish this with this. I got a chance to see her daughter, who was a oncology nurse, no doubt. It's like, I didn't know her much. I knew who she was, but I told her, I said, I just want you to know that your mother made me a far better husband, and certainly a better man. And I said, and I was really mad at her most of the time, because of all the things that she said, and she just smiled, and she just, it was nice to know that she understood exactly what I was saying, and that was one of my enlightened witnesses that I am just filled with gratitude about, and I know both Thom and Tally have been that for you. So thank you.
Yes. Thank you.